You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
Hello friends, welcome to episode 37 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take the game to the next level. I am Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How are we doing, Rob?
We're still dealing with the fact that we're in a different studio tonight with a little bit of an audio change. So I think there's just weirdness going on.
There's a little weirdness going on tonight.
So if you guys are noticing that there's our music's going a little longer and we're sitting here kind of stumbling a little bit, it's because we're literally having to look all the way across the room at Caitlin, who feels like a mile and a half away from us right now.
we're this big long table instead of this small intimate round table like we usually are.
Yeah, so we apologize. We apologize.
I should take a picture of this place and just put it up on Twitter for y'all.
Yeah, because it's much bigger. It's crazy. I mean, it's twice the size. It's twice the size. So, anyways, we are here. We are talking, and we're going to try and get through this craziness right now. Everybody's saying hi, Kate. So, she's waving and trying to get through her craziness.
Hi,
there
Local
she goes.
Celebrity.
There we go.
I feel great.
New doggy pictures will be coming out. Just wait. So tonight's show is on Burnout. And we're not talking about the video game. We're talking about...
Unfortunately, because that's an awesome video game.
It is. Don't confuse Burnout and Flat Out. Those are two different games.
Right.
Still fun. Both of them are fun. Hey, Knox, and Overwatch, and Sam, thank you for joining us. Strangely enough, I am seeing that Technolich is going to be missed tonight. But we will still talk about Technolich in the third person for this entire time. Just because. When we're thinking about Burnout, Sarah, I know that you had kind of immediately felt the dread of having the conversation about this because it came a little too real.
Yeah, there
recently.
Last game. I had to talk myself down from a bit of a ledge because it was I kind of felt like it was an unmitigated disaster, but
I think we all from our side of the table, a lot of small things seem a lot bigger than they are.
Oh yeah.
When there's a communication breakdown.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a huge thing that we all feel. So I think that's going to be something we'll definitely talk about tonight. But if you need to open with a little bit of therapy, by all means, I'll give you that thing. Or if you'd like to fit it in somewhere.
No, I think we'll get our discussion going, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about why I was feeling burned out.
Fair.
I think I'm feeling a little bit better, but I'm kind of glad this discussion is happening right now because it's happening in an apt time, at least for me. Because I felt burnout, and then I had to figure out how I was going to get past it.
Yep.
And I feel like I am now.
Good.
And so I can talk a little bit about how I kind of got through that.
Perfect.
In real time instead of just having to,
So when we're really talking about burnout, and we're talking about this kind of from both a player and a storyteller aspect, and that is when you're either frustrated or feeling overwhelmed or just straight out bored, and the storytelling in game ceases to be fun. And when you think about it, maybe you dread it. Maybe it feels like a chore. Maybe you put off a game or two because you're just you don't think you're ready, or you don't want to write, or you don't want to add. You look at an encounter, and you're like, I don't even know if I want to do this. Right then, you're in burnout. That's what that is.
Oh yeah,
it happens to us all.
How I would describe the feeling of burnout is when when you've eaten too much, but you've still got a little bit on your plate, and you kind of look at it and you go,
yeah.
And you're like, oh, I've got 2 bites left. Oh, I can fit them, but I don't want to. But I can fit them. When you get that feeling when you're looking at your game, when you look at the notes, the writing, the miniatures, whatever, and you go, that's you right there. You are burned out.
Yes.
You are starting to feel burnout.
Yes.
So it's like it happens to everybody, you know.
And there are triggers for it,
Yeah,
most
sure,
definitely.
Sure.
I
So
mean,
what causes burnout for you?
I think the biggest thing, and I'm going to say it, it's right at the top of our list, is when we have player conflicts at the table. And it can happen for any number of reasons. And I'm not necessarily saying conflicts with other players or even the player with the GM, which are definitely things that are direct. It can just be the player's conflict with the game or the system or devices. I mean, oftentimes not, and I know there's not a single storyteller that's on this that won't say that they've ran into this. How many times have you come into a game that's 26 sessions in or 15 sessions in, and someone's like, I don't know where my character is. Do you have a copy of my character sheet?
Right. You're like, how did you show up without a character? And already, like, you're tilted.
You're already there. You're already there because you're already stressed and anxious about the game, and now you have to worry about finding a version of their character sheet.
Right. And like, why is that my responsibility?
Exactly.
It's your damn character sheet. Like, oh God, yeah. So instantly causing conflict.
Yeah.
I think to talk a little bit about my own source of conflict here was this last game session we did have a little bit of player conflict because there was a rules interpretation.
I was an asshole.
Well, no, look.
I had to whisper it.
I'm not going to say that anybody at the table was an asshole. Okay, I'm really not. Look,
okay.
Everybody had their reasons for doing things, but there were certain things going on with me as a storyteller, things that I knew were going on behind my screen in the story and stuff like that. And instead of multiple players, yourself included, simply saying, okay, Sarah's got this under wraps. I trust her as a storyteller, and if I don't understand why this particular thing is happening, there's probably a good reason for it, and it will probably be revealed in the story later. Or if we ask some good questions, it may be revealed in the next few minutes. But I trust her, and I'm not going to question her.
Right.
Okay. That didn't happen.
No.
From several of my players. Yourself included.
Yep. And we're not going to get into details.
And
because we could go on for an hour of
pointing
therapy.
fingers.
Yep.
That statement is not loaded with any with any anger, and we have talked this through.
And you've talked to your other players.
Yeah. Exactly. So this has been talked through with the other players involved.
We'll get to
like that.
how that helped your resolution.
Right.
But player conflict definitely. How did it make you feel at the end of the session? I think that was the important part of that.
So
that conflict.
What it made me feel like is that my players don't trust me as a storyteller.
Okay, there you go. That's a perfect way that it brings. That's another piece of burnout.
And like I'm going to end up fighting through the rest of my games,
or
like
you're worried
if
that
this
you
continues.
are. Yeah,
exactly.
You're worried for the next encounter that it created a stress for future games.
Well, exactly, because the rules interpretation at hand was what was causing the stress for me. It was like, hold on a second, your character's level 6, and you're able to pull off this sort of a maneuver. And I'm looking at the rules that like 5th edition D&D presents for that sort of thing. And they're very loose.
Yeah.
They're very open to interpretation, but two things weren't happening. First off, the players involved were not trusting my interpretation of that rule and were questioning me on it, and which made me feel like I was not allowed to interpret these rules the way that they were.
Right.
And in a crunchier game that had more hard defined rules and hard defined limits on what skills and such like that can and cannot do.
Sure.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. That's probably a good place to have that, have that fight, and we'll look it up and we'll get down to it. But like skills in 5th edition are very loose.
Yeah.
Like,
and to put to a point, we talked about this from an earlier episode. And one of the things that we'd said was stop the argument, state that you're fact, and then come back, review.
Exactly.
And then
Review
that becomes the new
games.
rule. And that becomes your rule, and that's how things move on. And from a psychological standpoint, when you're in that moment, it is hard to remember those steps.
Yep.
It's hard to accept that that's going to be the way it's going to be okay, and that you can move from that. And I think that's part of what drives us is that we sit in that fear anxiety state.
Yeah.
And we forget that, no, I can have control here. I can have a communication. I can set my boundaries and move forward.
But at the same time, though, that's also the other aspect of it was when I did try to assert boundaries and say, this is what's going on, and these are my reasons for doing so. First off, I shouldn't have to justify it to you. There's a lot going on behind the DM screen that you do not understand.
Yep.
But secondly, I don't want to be that guy, you know? I don't want to be that person who's like, look, darn it, you know, this is my ruling and this is the way it's going to be. That's not me as a storyteller. I want it to be a friendly game and I want there to be good emotion. So I don't want to have to assert my dominance over any player at the table for any situation whatsoever.
And I'm with you. I think one of the hardest things is setting boundaries.
Yeah.
And then establishing. But once you get to a point where it's understood, going back to that boundary, the first time that you create a boundary is always the hardest. The first time the kid crosses the street and they shouldn't have, and you have to set that boundary that you're not allowed to leave the yard, you know, because it's dangerous and you could get hit by a car and you're scared, you're anxious, you're worried about what just happened. It is hard.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to set.
Yeah.
You know, the first time you do something and your boss is like, hey, we talked about this, that first interaction is always the worst. The second one, you recognize it and you're like, okay, can't do that. But your boss is still anxious that it's going to happen again.
Yeah, yeah.
Until they see that it doesn't. So that is a constant anxiety that's going to be there. But I think that the more communication helps, and getting past those moments make games more successful.
Yeah, yeah.
I had the same problem in 7th Sea. 7th Sea is exceptionally loose, unbelievably loose.
Oh, very, very
and
loose.
I have a player who is very much rule sensitive. Not so much that they care that there is a rule or that they just need the rules to be consistent constantly. And if there's a drift in that, it messes with their mind like, wait, what? And so 7th Sea, because it is very, I had to start setting table rules. I had to start setting my own rule sets to make them more consistent so that it was easier for players to be able to play the game in a consistent way to get the results that they're expecting.
Because when they ask, what does this tool do? The book says it does stuff.
Correct.
And that's about as concise as it gets in certain places.
Yeah. So I had to change that. And that was stressful as hell to me because I'm like, am I losing these players because the game's no longer fun?
Yeah.
And I had to understand, no, they're asking for a boundary and for something to be set, I have to set that. I have to give them an expectation. And then I have to meet it as well. And it is a stress. So I think that's a big thing. I think player conflict in general is a big thing. But if you can get past it, I think that's something strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like we need to move from this.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do. There's a lot of other things that cause burnout, but I think it's okay to dwell on this one a little bit because I think it's probably the biggest cause of burnout. Honestly, you know, everybody shows up to have, at least it's the biggest cause of burnout for me. You know, everybody shows up to have a good time, and when a good time is not had universally across the board, then you know, I think that's probably for me going like, okay, I'm not getting what I want out of this game, and it's becoming a chore. And if there's going to be negative feelings attached to it, I don't want to be the cause of any of that. So I'm just going to stop running it, you know?
No, I think I'm going to pause for one thing here,
Sure.
just to kind of roll back for 1/8 of a second before we move on. Knox was saying, talking about how the rules has a one-size-fits-all. Rules fit most, but there should always be an exception, and I think that's true. I think it's exceptionally important to do that, but I think it's very hard to get all of your rules out. You have what in your mind is going to be what's going to be necessary, and what's important, but getting to that point and having that conversation sometimes requires it to happen.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Stepping on. We need other things.
Sure.
Second one that we had kind of come up with that you had put down, which I totally agree with, is the story getting away from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either, and I'm going to preface one other part of that is getting away from the story. I mean, sometimes you have a mind frame of a completed story in your head, and the players decide to take option B. Yeah. And it just goes too far. And now you've lost the story that you originally had. Without a doubt, that's my D&D game from right the get-go. I lost the story, and then I did the one thing that I didn't think I would ever be able to do, and that was picked up a new story and ran with it. I just added on.
Sometimes that's not the story you're there for. You know, was it you that was telling me about? And I don't remember if this was an actual thing or if this was just an example that you cooked up. But you know, where the story you'd set was, you know, okay, so you know, session 1, there's a princess, and this dragon swoops down and steals the princess. And, you know, the intent is for the player characters to then say, well, we're going to go rescue the princess. But instead, your player characters say, we don't care about her. We've never met her. We've got no stake in her well-being or anything. Good luck with the dragon. We're going to go adventuring this way. You know, and
right.
So, you know, what do you do at that point? Do you reset the game? Do you try to railroad them back into rescuing the princess, or do you follow them and just say, okay,
it's where they want to go.
I guess we're going that way now.
Right.
I guess their story isn't the princess. Let's make something else up.
Yeah, and I had a mind frame of where I was going to take the story, and the players focused on something I didn't expect. And when they did that, I started saying, okay, well, I can either run with this and let them see where it leads them, let the world be the world. So I moved immediately my D&D game from a single story that I had set and was framed around certain players and certain character moments and motivations to this is a world. I have things in this world. I guess they could just happen. So I let literally the villain continue doing his job. And it happened. The world did what it was going to have happen to it. And the players are now attached to that. And so now we're done with that. That happened. The world changed. What are we going to do about that?
Right.
And so it progressed. It was interesting to kind of, it was a little cathartic in the release of that. It was hard to come back to it because I had to remember all the pieces. But
whoops.
Yeah, whoopsie. So I think stories getting away from you can be very challenging. I think some of my 7th games kind of did that at times, but I let 7th kind of roll where it wants to and have learned to adapt my storytelling to be more, well, I guess we're here and that person shows up, and it makes sense. And it's just the scene that I wanted to have now happens in a different place.
But to kind of get back onto why it can burn you out though, your stories are your babies.
Yeah.
As a storyteller, that's like the core reason you're sitting at the table. And if you're especially invested in, you've put all this time into writing these characters, these locations, these plots and such like that. And then to have your entire story, your entire team just like throw it out the window and just say, we're going to chase that goblin over there. And you're like, what the hell am I doing this for?
Right.
So, I think maybe you can combat that by being more willing to roll with the punches a little bit.
Yeah.
And writing your stories a little bit looser, and don't be afraid to
it's knowing your players.
Yeah,
I think that's the hardest part is knowing your players. If your players know that this episode or this series of episodes is about a dungeon crawl, they know where they are.
Yeah.
But if you literally put them in a pub and give them 4 people that they're talking to and don't hand them the plot in a giant paper bag that says plot,
they're going to figure something out for themselves, and it may not be what you want them to figure out.
Correct.
Yep.
And so I always say, if you've got players that are going to have a hard time figuring out what the plot is, cut out every scene that doesn't require it. Skip them from moment to moment. And move scene to scene with them and just change up the way the game is played. Because some players in an open world are great, and maybe that's what you're really good at is just an open world and do a day-to-day campaign. But if it's, the opening scene is not them meeting in a bar, you state to them how they know each other, how they're connected, and now they're in the grand hall of the king's chamber meeting with the king because he summoned them. And you start the scene with him introducing what they're doing and why they're there. You paint the scene like a movie.
Right.
Where you only give them the important moments that need to happen.
And you don't let them get away from it. So, yeah, it's a little more control.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little more control.
But sometimes players need that.
Yeah, absolutely.
At other times, if you're comfortable with them just doing, ass all, give them it. Just put it all out there let them play.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I do well with more direction. And I'll openly admit that. Like, my boyfriend was playing Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
And it's this big expansive open world. Like, what can you do in it? You can do anything. Okay. But what do you do? Anything. All right, I need something more than that. Point me in a direction, give me a quest, give me a purpose. Otherwise I'm just going to drive around Los Angeles for a while and get bored,
Until I need money, and then I'll bump into someone who's going to be like, "Oh, you have this job. Hey, I have plot.
Oh, hey, a quest.
Yeah,
all right,
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I don't deal well with open worlds very well. I need a purpose, give me something to do there.
Do you want to skip the next one? Because we kind of hit it.
Yeah, we talk about rules conflicts.
Yeah. I think that's just conflict in general with between you and your players and or something not happening the way you expect it.
Yeah.
I think that happens in a lot of games where you move from one system to another and you're trying to tell a story maybe in a new system and things aren't happening as you expected them to.
Yeah.
And that can be
Yeah.
damaging to like how you feel about the story.
Yeah, I think under rules conflicts too, I would also put things like power gamers, people who are kind of, they found that one rule that may not be tuned, completely, and they are exploiting the hell out of it to win literally every situation.
Yeah.
I've had that player at my table before, and it's awful. It's awful because it makes you feel powerless as a storyteller, and then you're like, why the hell am I even here?
Well, especially if you're expecting the game to be a challenge and they're making it challengeless.
Oh yeah.
And you keep ramping it up, and you're going between murdering the entire party and everything is too easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you and I have had that talk too about my encounter design. How it's like level 6 players, and it's like, hold on, unless I start doing X, Y, or Z, what rules tweaks can we have? And we've had this as a group discussion in our Discord of like, what rules changes can we do? Because I don't want to put murderous, certain death situations in front of all of you every single week. But at the same time, last time I thought it was for sure going to result in 1 or 2 player deaths. You killed the villain in 3 rounds.
I have a game with 9th level characters in it.
Only 5 of us, though.
5 9th level characters. This is going to be fun.
No, we'll be good.
No,
we'll
it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the numbers and tactics.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try something I've never done on Saturday, on the next game session, and see if it works out, and we'll talk about it and see if it comes through.
Oh.
But it has to do with some of the rules changes. It has to do with some of the movement, and I'm hoping that it works out and it's fun.
Okay.
Otherwise, you guys all might be rolling up new characters.
I have one of those.
I know you do. But we'll see how things go. The last thing I threw on here, and I think it's not as much as of a problem as so much as it's something that can definitely make you frustrated, and that is when the rules additions change. Like 7th Sea went from first edition to second edition. It came out. I was so excited. I was going to get ready to run a game. I started looking into it. I got to a certain point. I got some players together because I was like, hey, I want to try it with some, soft shoe with a couple players who are new, maybe 1 or 2 who've played.
I think I was one of those players. Yep. Yeah.
And I literally stepped into it, played a couple scenes, and realized this isn't gonna work because I have to change my whole brain. Like, I don't know how to do this. It felt like I was playing with Play-Doh.
Yeah.
Again, it was too different. And it discouraged me completely. I just wasn't comfortable.
It was extraordinarily freeform.
Yeah.
And
yet there's some level of rigidity to it, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's
then one of the players in your D&D game was also experiencing this kind of culture shock from the change in editions.
Very much so.
There was because our characters were originally written in 3.5.
Yep. And
then we're porting them over to 5th. With kind of the new chapter of your story after a decade.
Yeah,
After a decade hiatus from your game.
Yeah.
And so there were certain things that this other player had kind of based their character around, certain rules that they'd become attached to, certain combinations of things that they'd kind of worked into their personality and such like that for the character. And then when we switched over to 5th edition, there was some expectations that needed to change, you know, and that created a bit of a shock for that character, for that player, and understandably so, you know.
Yeah.
Not everybody is exactly able to just kind of go, oh, whatever, new rules, hey, cool, whatever, you know.
I mean, it adds a whole level of role play, which is very interesting, but it also changes how I have to tell the story to allow for that.
Yeah.
For that I'm clumsy in my shoes, my new shoes kind of a feel.
Yeah.
You know, was it Knights at the Dinner Table did that? Where they changed editions. No, it wasn't Knights at the Dinner Table. What was the other webcomic?
Oh,
that was big.
Munchkin?
No. I just remember all of them popping new things that they got in one of the strips.
Order of the Stick.
Order of the Stick. That's who it was. And you just see everybody change except for the bard.
Right.
And he's just like, oh. Like somebody gets a bow, someone else gets like a bigger dagger, and like, you know, I think the rogue gets a bigger dagger, and like, hey, like, and suddenly like the cleric's like, you know, bigger holy symbol, and you're like, wow, this is really great. The bard's like, it's the same.
Bard sucked in 3.5.
Yeah. But that's the kind of thing that I think that growing pain can sometimes cause a problem. Another thing that you had kind of put in here, and I totally agree with, is the tedium. Doing it.
Yeah.
When it becomes a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're doing something week after week for planning, and
it just becomes routine.
Yeah.
It just becomes, I don't know. Yeah. When you look, like I said, when you look at it and you go, then you're getting burned out. You know? When it's no longer like, hey, I got a few spare minutes and I'm going to work on my game. I got a great idea and I'm really excited about it. When you lose that spark,
right? And
it's just now like, all right, well, I got to put in some work on my game, I guess.
I mean, I that always will be there, but I think that there's a difference between like, oh, dude, I got to put a lot of work on my game. Like, oh crap, Saturday's my game. I gotta get my game up.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a little different feel.
There's pressure. There's always pressure to perform. I mean, but that's just storytelling in general. But what I'm talking about was when it stops being a labor of love,
right, and
starts being a labor.
Yeah. And I think there's a point in that in every story, and there's some room for that. There were some definite ideas that I've heard some people come up with for breaking that down, because I've known games that have run, like I've read about them and been party. I jumped into a game at one point that was already 4 years old, and I felt so weird being a new character in that game. It was so weird.
Oh, I bet.
The acceptance level of stepping into that game was just asinine, because they didn't play for the first 2 hours of a 4-hour session. It was conversation outside of the game, because it was just friends getting together more than anything else. And it felt so weird, because I was ready to play. I wanted to play a game. I hadn't played a game in forever. I'd GM'd. I wanted to get back in the game, and I sat down and
I'd be pissed.
It was so discouraging. I did 2 sessions and walked.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I could not do it. So I think that's definitely something from the player aspect, is when you have an expectation of what a game's going to be like and it just doesn't work out. Like right now, it sounds terrible. My new edition of my Shadowrun book is in the basement on a table from Gen Con. I haven't put it back on my shelf upstairs because I'm really not interested in it, because my last session sucks so bad.
Oh.
That was my Gen Con session.
No.
2 years ago.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, God, was that 2 years ago?
It was 2 years ago.
Oh, my God. I remember printing those minis for you.
Yep.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And then the last thing you got, I lost it here.
I'm sorry. We're just getting old on the air right now.
We are totally getting old.
Oh, my God. All right. So, tedium, long breaks.
Oh, funny that.
Sometimes you have a break of a month or more between games, holidays, medical reasons,
especially
work,
like December,
life, kids,
snow, just hazards, things like that.
And you just lose it. You just lose it. You fall out of rhythm, and you just can't get it back. And then it's like, oh God, what do I even do anymore?
Yeah.
Yep. No, I feel you.
Yeah.
So, we talked a lot about what burnout is, what causes burnout.
I think there's a lot of emotions there.
What do you do with it?
Honestly,
I've got something that isn't on the list. I forgot.
I've got a few things that aren't on the list.
All right. So let's do the list.
All right, we'll do the list,
and then we'll just fly off the handle. It will go completely unscripted
for a couple of minutes.
For like a couple,
because we got some questions,
and then we'll answer some questions.
Not that we've ever done that before.
We're gonna get wild and crazy about Dungeons and Dragons.
All right. Well, generally things. So I definitely agree. Take a step back.
Yeah.
Like move away from the tedium of the game of focusing on something and just do a random encounter. Do something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Make up something hilarious. I think a lot of writers do this in series on TV. They'll just throw a random episode in that is full of crap.
I'm thinking of the Deep Space Nine Ferengi episodes.
Oh God, yeah.
Where it's just like Quark and Rom, and they just go off on some weird adventure.
Trouble with Tribbles, I think, was totally one of those.
Yeah.
Rick and Morty does like commercial, basically, where they do like snippets, and it's basically them drunk and high in a booth, and then somebody animates it.
Oh God.
And it's ridiculous, but I mean, it's hey, we're just doing something silly.
Yeah.
And I think that really, as from a storyteller aspect, I think that gives you a lot of fun to just do something stupid.
Yeah.
And it's frivolous. It does better. Like it, and sure, you could just do, and you wake up the next morning refreshed. You look at you look outside and realize that wasn't real. Was it a dream? Did any of this really happen? You know, you do kind of a Groundhog's Day. And you can just move right on like nothing ever happened. There's a lot of fun ways to do that. There's some great encounters you can find online that are like that.
Yeah.
Where you can insert them into virtually any game and it's just some random fun that happens and people are like, oh God, you know, how are we going to survive or how are we going to get through this or what the hell's going on? And then at the end, it just turns out to be a giant fart of nothing and you move on and it's fun. And it just got you out of it. You didn't have to do much. You grabbed a canned adventure. I mean, honestly, one of I would say that step back can also include doing just that. Grab a canned adventure from online, change a few of the names on it, and literally throw your players into that. Read right off the script, you know, add a few voices to it, and literally you're doing fine. Like you didn't have to think about that adventure.
Yeah.
It was there for you.
The Ogres of Wendell Farms was that adventure for us.
There you go. Boom.
As soon as Matthew joined our group, I needed just a one-off just so you guys get to know each other.
Yeah.
And you know, get Matthew into the game and stuff like that. So I'm like, I don't know, you get hired to kill some ogres or something like that. Okay, go.
There you go. Yeah. I think that was perfect. I think that was a great step back.
It was great.
Yep.
But you know, kind of along the lines of stepping back though, you know, don't force it. Like, if storytelling is not fun for you anymore and you can't find a way to change it to make it fun again, like, stop. It's okay. It's okay to take a break and just step away from your game, you know? Things come to ends and that's fine. But, you know, if it's you, I think the important thing to remember about Storyteller Burnout is that you're also a player at the table. And the game should be fun for you too, you know?
Right.
And so even if your players are having fun, like, and you can't find a way to salvage that, like, it is perfectly okay for you to say, guys, this isn't working for me anymore. I can't continue to tell this story, you know?
Right.
It's you know, it's disappointing.
Right.
There may be some hurt feelings and stuff like that, but your alternative is continue doing something that is tedious and not fun for you.
Exactly.
And probably eating up multiple hours a week.
Yes.
For you, you know, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
If you're forcing yourself to do it. So.
Yeah, but again, communication, we say it is always key.
Yeah.
Always keep it up. Because the more quiet you are, the more people start thinking about other things.
Yeah.
You get worries. Fears grow fast.
Talk to your players. Be honest. Let them know it's like it's you. It's not them. You know, or maybe it is them. You know, but talk to them about that. Like, this is the thing that is making the game not fun for me.
Yeah.
Can we resolve it?
Yeah.
Can we come to an agreement that, you know, X, Y, or Z should not happen or needs to happen? Or maybe it's just, guys, I got too much going on in my life right now, and this is becoming a second job for me, and I can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's basically what happened to me. That's why I had to back away from it when I did.
Yeah.
And it was a good thing. And I had to back away from I literally just stepped off from everything.
Look, we all give you crap about it being a decade between game sessions, but like none of us are salty about that because we know what was going on.
Right.
You know?
Right.
We know that real life concerns stepped up for you.
Yep.
And so
and kept stepping up for a while.
and I'm just glad to be back at your table.
Yep.
Honestly. So
same here.
Look, if it takes a decade, if we'd have never come back, okay, that's fine. I understood.
There were still stories to be told.
But you know what? I'm just glad to be back at your table.
Thanks.
So.
Sometimes you got to restart.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to hit that restart button and just, you know, you've lost it.
Yeah.
That's whatever you wrote is gone.
You know what, guys? This D&D game is dead. We're playing Shadowrun now.
Exactly. You know,
we've been you all been begging me to run this game. You've been begging me to run Adventure for a while now, and this D&D game has gotten out of hand. I think we're just meandering at this point. F it. Let's just toss it in the bin. We're playing Adventure next week. Start rolling up characters. We'll do session 0.
Yep.
You know?
I think that is a great way to just shift gears.
Yeah.
You know,
for my players that's listening, that's not an official announcement. We're not doing Adventure yet.
No.
D&D is alive and well.
Correct. Although I may have sent you some inspiration recently.
Whoops.
Yeah. Which I think comes in another thing that I'm going to come up with, but I think restarts are a 100% valid way to help you as a storyteller. I think sometimes restarting in your own story mentally, sometimes you just have to kill what you have and move on, start another story, move in a different direction. I think that's 100% valid. I think that's 100% optional. I think it's sometimes important and cathartic. because you can get so attached to a story that you're trying to recover, or you're trying to get your players back attached to, or maybe you've lost players and new players have come on. So there's been information that just didn't come through, and things have, just meandered for too long. And you're like, crap, what am I going to do with this? I like the players and I like their characters, but my story's kind of shit. Start over.
Yeah.
A boat shows up on shore with a new captain saying, I'm going after X. And suddenly the players are like, oh, we're going this way. And story now goes in a whole nother direction.
Yep.
And at some point they may be like, hey, whatever happened to this big bad guy?
Yeah, no. He's not around anymore. Anyways, here's the boat with pirates.
Yeah. Anyways, here's Wonderwall.
Right. Anyways, here's Wonderful.
You know what? That's what's going to be. I'm going to bring a ship into shore named Wonderwall.
Right.
And you'll know that the game is
happened to
changing.
that plot? I don't know.
No,
anyway, here's Wonderwall. Beautiful.
So, which kind of leads that thing I was just saying was one of the things that helps me out of burnout is inspiration. And inspiration for me comes from reading other people's stories. Sometimes it's reading, I'll go into the D&D Reddit and I'll look at people's creations. One of the most recent ones I sent you was music.
Yeah.
It was a remix and kind of techno lift on 20s music. 1920s music. And
I haven't listened to it yet. I'm dead honest with you.
It's fun. It is fun. It's an hour 10 of just continuous mixed loops.
Yeah.
Of different things. And it's different and it's fun and it's light. It's like welcoming you back to the 20s. And I kind of like that. I was like, this has kind of got a, steampunk techno edge to it, which kind of reminded me a little bit of the feel of Aberrant with the sound that was coming through, that radio sound.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is great inspiration. I like this. I think this would be fun to be playing in the background while we're figuring out our characters.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I loved doing that. Like I say, but talking about real life jumping up and biting you in the ass.
Sorry, I was laughing at Knox.
Oh,
techno lift. Techno lit.
Yes. But talking about real life buzz, stepping up and biting you in the ass. That's unfortunately I started trying to run trying to run adventure at a real bad time in my life.
Yeah.
And so
You still did a beautiful job. Don't get that wrong.
Oh yeah, both game sessions were great. I enjoyed the hell out of them. But
you couldn't keep it up.
But I was just trying to manage a campaign and transition at the same time was not working for me. So
no, that's a fight.
That's
a fight on site, bro.
That's a fight on site, bro. So, all right, we talked about restarting, we talked about talking to your players, we talked about even just walking away, just burning it all down.
Yep.
All right, so we're going off script now.
Do it.
Those are the only 3 things on our list. All right, what's helped me pull myself out of a bit of a funk was, first off, talking to my players.
Yep.
So I've got a better understanding of what happened at my table. I think there may need to be some more discussion when we've got everybody together at the table next time. And just kind of, come to some mutual agreements as a whole group rather than having individual, talks and stuff like that. But the big thing that's gotten me back on the wagon, though, and feeling good about my game is taking pride in my own accomplishments. Finding the light in my game rather than dwelling on the darkness of what it was.
That is fantastic. That's hard to do, but that's fantastic insight.
And if y'all have been watching the Instagram for Storyteller Conclave, you see some of the stuff that I've been putting up there for my game, for Rob's game. And
there's something coming. You guys are gonna love it.
Oh, I'm
overhyping it, but I love it. I really do.
I'm eating it up. Eating it up, absolutely. So. And so I've been diving real hard into painting minis. I've been diving real hard into making terrain. I had that resin river that I poured out for you guys.
So beautiful. So beautiful.
And it was like, I'm going to sit here and toot my own horn. I'm not even going to be modest about it. Like, it was beautiful. I'm still blown away by how well that came together. And then especially when we put like Steve's trees on there and got, all the miniatures placed on it. I mean, it was a beautiful scene.
It was a beautiful scene.
Absolutely beautiful. And so I keep looking at those pictures and going like, holy shit, like I did that.
Yeah.
I'm the one responsible for that landing on the table. And I remember all of your absolutely gobsmacked, expressions when I plopped it on the table.
Yeah.
And going, oh my God, that's what we're playing with today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're damn right it is.
Yep.
So just reminding myself, I guess, that, there's good things that I can get out of this. There's good things that I can offer you guys,
Right.
you know, because I painted a mini for you. I haven't posted it per your request because you want it to be a surprise. And a lot of your players follow our Instagram, so I don't want them to see it yet.
Nope.
But you know, I painted that and I sent it off to you, and you were very enthusiastic about it. So, you know, that's got me feeling real good about the game again.
Good.
And like, you know what, if even if we do have stupid rule arguments or whatever, you know, that's fine. That happens at the tables, but God damn it, I've got the best minis sitting out there.
You really do.
You know,
you really do. And I think that's a great thing. I think hyping yourself, finding your joy, you know, what makes you smile, what makes you want to come to the table the first time around. I think that's sometimes we forget what initially inspired us to do what you're doing in your game. And I would encourage storytellers to keep their inspirations close. So that they've got that to go back to, so that when you're, you know, lost in a story or the story's moved on from something, go back to your inspiration. Go back to that music, the movie, whatever. Like if I'm not feeling good about 7th Sea, I go back and watch scenes. I'll go on YouTube and catch scenes of like The Three Musketeers, Man in the Iron Mask.
Oh yeah,
those types of movies.
Yeah,
because I can hear the dice hitting the table. I can listen in my head and hear my players doing things, and it gives me that drive back to doing those things.
Now watch as Inigo Montoya burns a drama die and takes out an entire brute squad in one turn, so he can get to Count Rugen.
Actually, for me, it's not even that.
Yeah,
it's him getting stabbed and standing up.
Oh yeah,
I'm burning a drama die to ignore my wounds.
To ignore dramatic wounds.
And I'm literally just pushing through the scene. There's skills for that.
You have 57 flesh wounds. I'm aware.
The next thing is going to kill you.
I'm also aware.
And then he proceeds to duel, literally, you know, and drive through the duel, which then buys him more drama dice because he makes his way through the duel.
Yes.
I was in a game in 7th Sea where all of us were literally, you know, shackled behind our hands, caught by a villain, and like, or by a henchman. And he's just like, you know, he's going to be so happy when he finally sees you. And he goes through and knocks us out. And he finally gets to one of our Eisen characters, who's actually apparently a prince.
Eisen, for those of you who don't know, 7th Sea is fake Germany.
Fake Germany. Pretty much during like a Protestant war.
Sure.
Civil War. So he's there on his knees staring up at him, and the guy goes to knock him out. He goes, I spend a drama die to ignore it. And we're all like, what? And as the blood trickles down my face, I spit it back at him. He hits you again harder. I spend my last drama die. And we're all like, you know, and I was like, okay, dude, what are you going to say to him? And he said something that was amazing. And then he's like, he punches you with the pommel of his sword, knocking you out. Like, here's all your, you know, tons of flesh. He goes, no, that's way over. I can't roll for that. So, he just takes it. But everybody agreed, like, it was one of the most important scenes that he was basically able to eat this guy's hits and spit back at him like, I will kill you one day with that sword in your hand.
Right.
He did. I remember him killing that guy with his own sword.
I'm just thinking of every bad Arnold Schwarzenegger line, you know?
Yeah.
Remember when I said I would kill you last? I lied.
It's stuff like that. But it's moments like that remind me, okay, I do want to do this. I do want to wait for those scenes. And having those close at hand help for writing other stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. You want to hit questions before we run out of time?
I was actually just going to tell you, want to take a few questions?
I thought we should totally take some questions because we're going to run out of time during these questions.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
And I know there was a question that came up and in the live show chat, so I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Draven.
Yeah.
Copy on that question for us so that we can see that Draven and throw it in here as well. But let's start with Knox's question. I'm going to cut to the question part of this. What are some things players can do that are positive, and what are some of your favorite things players have done for you?
Ooh. I think for me, things players can do that are positive. We've kind of baked this into the breakdown from our game.
Yeah.
So at the end of the game, we ask, did you have fun? What was the favorite thing, and what could we have done better next time? but I think for storytellers out there who don't automatically do that,
Right.
the best thing a player can do for me is tell me what really excited them about the game. Tell me what your favorite thing was. Tell me that one moment or that one line that you're going to be talking about for the next week with your friends. Because to me, the reason I tell stories is because I like sharing that joy with other people at my table, and that's why like player conflict and stuff like that is such a big downer for me, because it's the antithesis of why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
If I'm creating negative emotions through my game, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
I'm missing the point. But if you come to me and tell me like, oh my God, that scene when your villain did this and then, this other player at the table said this to them and everybody cracked up, like, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, that's awesome. As a storyteller, I put that into motion and I might not have delivered that killer line. That was definitely a player at my table, but I put him in the situation where that line came out of them and everybody had a great time. Aerosmith, yeah. Or the one from our last game, like, oh, you think you're such a good deceiver, try toppling an entire city and bringing it to its knees. Well, I don't know, it sounds a bit much, but I'll clear my schedule.
I thought, again, fantastic.
Fantastic line.
I agree with that
line.
100%. For me, it is still hearing Trevor tell his story from 7th Sea, where he made a huge explosion of dice against another player and told to put the baby back. Just hearing his voice in my head and then hearing him retell his story, or somebody else telling that same story to someone else, or Erica doing the 7th Sea story where she literally seduced a priest out of being a negative NPC character into becoming one of the hero's friends.
Whoops, my hand slipped.
Exactly. So those kind of things are important to me. Those kind of positives, they're worth way more than a GM bribe. They're worth way more to me than even just at the end of the story recapping it. It's hearing it months, years later.
Oh yeah.
That is a joy. That is a joy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I would say that.
But I mean, on top of that, though, things players have done for me, I'm still absolutely floored that we've got some other really great painters and crafters in my group.
Yeah.
So like Steve always brings his trees and his houses and his outdoor terrain.
That's a little
like that.
thing, yeah.
Erica's got her bin of little bits and bobs of scatter terrain, and they're just invaluable to me because I don't want to spend hours recreating something that's already sitting in her basement.
Yeah.
Just bring your thing of bits and bobs, Steve, bring your trees, and wham, I'm going to be ready for anything. I'm going to be able to put any scene together on that table because we've come together as a group.
Yeah.
And
I think that's another thing for me is that I think if I could pinpoint one thing that a player does for me, it's when I sit down at the table and I see someone with their dice out, their stuff up, their sheet ready, and they look at me and they're like, okay. And they're like a puppy waiting to go out for a walk. Like that look right there sells it for me. I'm ready to play the game.
If we had tails, they would be wagging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, because not everybody comes to the game that way. Sometimes they're tired and it's just too much.
Exactly.
But no, I think those are the things that do it for me.
Yeah.
You want to hit the next one?
Technolich asks, what would be a good sales pitch for people who have never done tabletop role playing? This is a tricky question.
I loved the sales pitch that someone once gave a friend of mine after he hooked up. I think it was his fiance or his wife at the time had found his gaming books, and so he gave this like hour-long speech, of what, diatribe of what D&D was.
Okay.
And at the very end of it, she looks at him and says, "So it's like adult make-believe." And he's like, yeah, it's adult make-believe. And she's like, "Okay, can we try?" And he immediately called 4 people. They all showed up. And they started playing D&D that night.
I feel like this is a conversation we've had with Kate.
Yeah.
She's nodding emphatically.
Yes. So I think sales pitching any game system starts from knowing the person's likes.
Yeah.
And if they are interested in any way, find something specific that they like. Maybe they're a movie person. Maybe they're a music person. Maybe they have a specific, like when they heard about D&D or role-playing in general, they had an idea of something about it that intrigued them. That is the doorway. That is where the sales pitch goes in. And that's where you can talk to them about it can be as challenging or as simple as you want it to be. Because there is a plethora of systems and a plethora of games out there that you can play. I mean, literally, I've had people say that, the the hidden werewolf game. And I'm using that one instead of all the other ones.
Sure.
Where somebody at the table is a werewolf and someone's the investigator, and then everybody else are just a bunch of peons, and you're trying to figure out which one's the werewolf, and there's only one. The rules are very simple, but everything's role playing at that point.
Yeah.
You're sitting around a table role playing with each other under some very basic rules. That's role playing. That's tabletop role playing.
Yes, it is.
So games can be anything in that sense. So I would say your sales pitch goes with what they like and what their angle on interest started at.
Yeah. I usually start by asking some questions when I have the "what is D&D anyways" talk with people. But a lot of times, like I always think back to like the Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Oh,
that
yeah.
used to be out.
Yeah.
I was like, did you ever read any of those? It's kind of like that, only it's a lot more free form. Instead of just giving you, if you choose to do this, turn to page 57, and if you do this, turn to page 83. It's what do you do? Mm-hmm. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. I mean, if there's some, or I also compare it to like, did you ever play Cops and Robbers when you were a little kid?
Right.
And you'd run around the yard going, bang, bang, I shot you. And then inevitably someone would say, no, you didn't, or I'm immune to bullets.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's just like that, only we've got some rules to figure out who exactly is immune to bullets, how immune are you, and how big are the bullets you're firing, and really, did you hit them?
Short answer, Sam, yes, you can. They're still out there. In fact, there's a ton of them on the internet that you can find. There's actually 2 or 3 software packages I'll see that are online only.
Oh, Choose Your Own Adventures?
Yeah, you can actually handcraft them. There's a neat thing that you can do where one person basically has a window where they can draw and build stuff and write a few minor things, and then the other person just sees text, and then the image gets displayed when they're done with it.
Oh.
And basically you can live choose your own adventure with one person.
Interesting.
It is very interesting. Yeah, that's a couple years old now. So, anywho, I think we have a few more questions. I think we should totally hit them.
All right. Next up, Vedran. Vedran is asking, having completely crushed my rediscovered DM groove with your comparison to running games to preparing for the holidays. Sorry, buddy.
Yep.
Sorry. How do you deal with pre-game anxiety?
You plow through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You take a deep breath and you eat some sour gummies that your players have provided for you out of love.
Yes.
And you remember that everybody's friends there and you're going to have a good time regardless. And no plan is ever going to survive contact with your party.
No.
And you just accept that and you plow forward.
Yep. I mean, I'm going to agree. I can't say anymore.
Good talk.
Yep. Good talk.
All right. Last one. You want it?
Sam, I love your question. This is going to be really hard for us to try and hit, but we're going to do our best. If you've never DM'd before but are planning to, what are some things to expect, or what can you prepare for? First off, there's nothing you can truly prepare for other than just running the story. That's the best thing. And be prepared to be discouraged and daunted and overwhelmed all at the same time.
Yes.
That is the easiest thing to say. Always have dice. Mm-hmm. Always be prepared that your players may not have dice,
yes,
especially if they're brand new. And are there things you can make sure to keep everything flowing? The first thing I always say is, are the players having fun? If they're not, change what you're doing so that they're having fun. Right. If it's dialing back the monsters, if it's giving them something silly, if it's fudging a dice roll on your side to make something work, if it's one of the players is getting a little out of hand with their heavy-handedness, silence them. Just throw something weird at them that silences them so that they can't do that.
Yeah.
But literally keep the fun going. I think that's one of the first things that you can do in any game is start with fun, move from there.
Yeah. As far as things that can keep everything flowing, I know specifically you're running a Dungeons and Dragons game, so I will address it in those terms for you. Things to do is like pre-roll your initiative.
Oh, yeah.
Because honestly, whether those dice hit the table in front of your players or whether they hit them a week beforehand when you're drawing up your notes, it doesn't matter. Your assassins have a 16 initiative, whether that happened now or a week ago. And that way you've already got that done and you can just ask your players for their initiative and fit them in wherever they go, So like I use D&D Beyond for mine, and all my note taking I use Evernote, which is another online note taking thing.
I think that's great.
So what I do is when I build my encounters, I already have links to the monsters in D&D Beyond, and so when the encounter comes up, I can literally just tap on the 3 different monsters, and their stat cards come up for me.
Yeah, I would also keep a notepad or some kind of something you can quickly write on. I typically use that for keeping track of hit points and action pools and things like that, depending on the game that it is, so that my encounters can move very quickly and I'm not fudging with electronics to try and type things in or write something. I can literally just scribble down a number or put a hash mark down if it's 7C, because I'm keeping track of how many dramatic wounds something has, and that's what I do. I think there are lots of methods depending on for initiative control and who's in what order. I think that those are all great, but there's nothing beats having a small notepad that you can literally, when you're done with that encounter, flip the page and move to the next one.
I would jot down a monster's AC right by their current hit points.
Because it can change.
Yeah, it can change, and also, but it's also just a reminder, so I'm not flipping through tabs on my tablet. That way I've got it right in front of me, so I just know this one's got 14, this one's got a 16 AC, whatever. Lastly, I will say let your players know who's on deck for initiative. That's good, because then they know that their clock is ticking for making a decision. And that keeps your players from like, okay, Rob, it's your turn. And then Rob starts thinking, what do I want to do now?
Right.
Oh, you know what? You could have been thinking about that during the previous player's turn.
And I would say, if you're starting out as a GM like you are, please, for God's sakes, do not do more than 4 people. If you're going to do like 4 or 5, you're starting to step into realms that are going to be challenging. So I would say keep it small for your sake. Have at least 2 players. Don't do a one-on-one session as your first one, because it feels very different and can feel very daunting.
Yeah, it feels a little awkward because there's a lot of pressure on one person.
Yeah. Now, I do want to get to Draven's question.
But before you get to Draven's question,
go ahead.
I just want to mention that Heatsink, I did see what you said in the live chat about eating my gummies, and I will kill you. I know where you sleep.
Yep. That's
Anyways,
now on
Draven's
record.
question.
Yep. So, totally random question as I'm doing game prep. If you have an NPC give a speech, or just a dialogue in general, do you repeat yourself so that players can get it accurate in the notes, or do you just say it once, just like they'd hear it in real life? I've done both.
Yeah.
I've had expositions go right over the head of all my players, and they miss the important things in it. And I think that that's something that, depending on how important it is for the scene versus how important it is for the entire story, can be rewrapped in summary. Or re-exposed by another NPC that was maybe present or was aware of the conversations. Like maybe they bring that information back to someone else and they're like, wait a second, he said what? He said, and then repeat it.
Right.
Another thing that you can do is, if you find that your players aren't, and I'm not going to say they're not listening well, but they're missing audio cues, switch that kind of stuff over to a written cue. Hand them notes that have the writing on there that's important.
Yeah.
But I think summaries help that a lot. But anytime you're giving an exposition where you have a player who needs to be paying attention and they're not, maybe that teaches you as a storyteller that they're not good at listening through that methodology. Because you can't always trust all of your players to be on the ball on the game that you need to expose something to them.
Yeah.
You need to be prepared for that level of frustration to come to you and be able to shift gears and say, okay, do I need to write this down, or do I need to tell him it again, or do I need to tell him it again differently? And that, I think, is an important process to get to. So to kind of answer your question, I would say only a few times have I done repeats. More times than not, I will repeat it in a different way. I will expose that same line again in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I think another thing too is, if don't depend on them to just catch it on the fly. Like especially if you watch Critical Role, you'll see Matt Mercer do this, where he'll be in the middle of exposition and someone's writing down notes, like trying to take names or something like that. And instead of just continuing on with his speech, he'll pause. He'll give them the name again, a spelling if necessary, and then he'll continue his speech. Because The speech is important, but what's more important at the end of the day is that your players understand what's happening.
Correct.
And so if you do need to take a brief pause and just say, he said, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Did you get that? Okay, cool. He continues, wham. Right. Then that's great. That's great, and that's also, you mentioned summaries.
Yep.
That's what I do in mine.
Yep.
Is, I always start by rereading the summary of the last game, and I give pertinent facts. So whether you guys caught it or not in speech, it's written in the summary.
Correct.
You went here, you talked to so-and-so, you learned X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And it is explicitly stated with no flowery language, no, opinion. It is a fact stated for you that you know.
Exactly. And I think that's super important.
And so that way the story can continue. I don't get any enjoyment about you guys floundering around Lost. That wastes my time and yours.
Yep.
So,
all right, next week we're doing our Knox topic of this, which is dynamic storytelling.
Yep. So for those of you who are joining us maybe a little bit late and haven't heard this information before, if you are a Patreon member at our top tier subscription supporting our show, one of the perks that you get for that is the ability to kind of suggest a show topic for us. Knox is our one of our top tier subscribers, so as a favor to him, he has suggested to us a conversation about dynamic storytelling, a conversation about how player choice affects the story unfolding, and what a you as a storyteller can do about that. So we're delighted to discuss that next week. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave. Instagram, @ST_conclave. Check it out there. I'm posting a lot of miniatures and terrain and stuff.
So cool.
And on Discord, you can find the link on our Twitter and in the episode description of every single episode of this podcast on your favorite podcast software.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially Knox, who was out there doing at our contributor level.
And Samantha.
And Sam. Yes, thank you so much for helping us. Every one of these dollars helps us with all the rest of our Patreon members as well to keep this show going. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrogmusic.weebly.com. We also have our outro music, which you're hearing now, which is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find that at soundcloud.com/midairmachine/tracks.
We record every week at Podcast Detroit. You can find them online at podcastdetroit.com, on Twitter at Podcast Detroit. We want to give a big shout out to our sound engineer, Caitlin, and her dog.
Yes, her doogie.
Little Jack Daniels. And, of course, a big shout-out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean, all of our friends who have sat at our tables and gamed with us over the years, and especially you, our listeners. We love you all.
Good night, everybody.